Hello everyone, I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer. Bring latest on Telltale games, Transformers, and more. Welcome back to, after almost 5 months, to another Transformers EarthSpark review, and I'm recording this on Friday, July 28th, later at night, but so it is officially EarthSpark Day, aka the release of the final batch of EarthSpark Season 1, which is Season 1C, but this video will be going up the next day on the 29th at around noon Eastern Standard Time. So I hope you all have been enjoying just a little break from EarthSpark for the past 5 months. It's hard to believe we've gone almost half a year without new EarthSpark episodes, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but man, time flies. But here we are now with the first of the final batch of EarthSpark Season 1, Episode 19, A Stygi Situation, where we finally see Jawbreaker getting his alt mode after he was introduced almost 10 episodes ago. I will say, out of all the episodes this season, this is probably tied with Outtakes as Jawbreaker's best episode by far. Cyrus Arnold is amazing as him, and we also get another surprise character in this episode that their performance is amazing too. So we're going to go ahead and see everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. Episode 19 starts off the day after the events of the last 2 episodes, Home Parts 1 and 2, which, wow, it's hard to believe that this episode takes place only a day after those episodes, but yet it's been 5 months in the real world since that episode came out. But anyway, I digress. This episode starts off the day after those episodes with Robbie, Mo, and the rest of the Terrans all heading back to the Malto homestead, presumably having him just gotten flowers for Bumblebee in an effort to make him feel better after he was grievously injured at the events, during the events of Home Parts 1 and 2, where not only did he get beat up battling Brawl in the Bot Brawl, he got drained by Mandroid, he got his arm chomped on by Grimlock, and a bunch of other bad stuff that happened to him. However, they also, once they reach the Malto, they decide they're going to take a little, like, group picture as well to, like, frame for Bumblebee as well with the flower. Once they do that, though, they realize that in the frame of the photo is none other than Grimlock, who, after the events of Home Part 1, managed to somehow make his way all the way from Philadelphia to Witwicky, specifically with the Malta Homestead, and start causing havoc there, who is still in range mode after Thrash, Mo, and Jawbreaker managed to get him out from Mandroid's mind control in that episode. So we get a nice little action scene to start off this episode with Twitch, Thrash, hashtag Nightshade, all battling Grimlock in an effort to try and calm him down and just restrain him. Bumblebee even comes out to try and lend a hand, but he's not really much help because his Stinger arm is still malfunctioning due to what happened during the events of Home Parts 1 and 2. And Jawbreaker offers to help out as well, but Bumblebee and the rest of the Terrans say that Jawbreaker, since he doesn't have an alt mode, should stay back because he could get really hurt. So he is in charge of taking care of Robbie and Mo while the rest of the Terrans deal with restraining Grimlock, and with enough effort they do manage to restrain him. And that sort of sets up the conflict this episode, in that Jawbreaker always feels like, since he doesn't have an alt mode, as in he's the only Terran now to not have an alt mode, he feels like he's constantly being sidelined or pushed aside by his other siblings, to the point where he doesn't get to do all the fun stuff they get to do, or just not be useful at all. And that's a really nice conflict that gets explored later on this episode. After the rest of the Terrans sans Jawbreaker managed to restrain Grimlock, we cut forward to a little bit in the future where we see Grimlock has actually managed to transform back into his main bot mode, where he's being watched over not only by Bumblebee and the rest of the Terrans, but Alita as well, making her first appearance in EarthSpark in almost 7 episodes, with her last appearance being in episode 12, Outtakes. This is also, unfortunately, Alita 1's final voiced performance in this season of EarthSpark. While she does appear as a major character in 2 more episodes, Cissy Jones does not voice her in those episodes, and she's just silent, which is really weird, but I'll get into that in my review of those episodes later on down the line. But anyway, as Alita, Bumblebee, and everyone else look over Grimlock, he immediately panics, thinking that he is still being controlled by Mandroid, and that's something we see throughout the course of this episode, that Grimlock has PTSD from his time being controlled by Mandroid and being forced into the bot brawls, which we'll see throughout several really cool hallucinations / nightmares throughout this episode. But anyway, Grimlock transforms, and he assures Alita and Bumblebee that he's alright, noticing that Bumblebee's walking around with a little Energon IV tube wrapped into him, and of course this is because since Bumblebee got seriously injured during the events of Home Parts 1 and 2, he's sort of bedridden for the majority of this batch of episodes. He'll finally get better by the end of it, but for the first maybe like 5 or 6 episodes of this batch, Bumblebee is just completely out of the picture. He just stays behind as basically support for the rest of the Terrans, which is really cool to see, and gives the Terrans more room to actually act as independent characters without Bumblebee just telling everyone what to do and so on. Another thing we gotta talk about with Grimlock is, of course, his design and voice actor. So, compared to other versions of Grimlock that we've had throughout the years of the Transformers franchise, EarthSpark Grimlock is closest to G1 Grimlock in terms of design, and that's mostly apparent in his color scheme and his face design. So just like G1 Grimlock, EarthSpark Grimlock doesn't actually have a face. It's more so just a faceplate and visor, very similar to G1 Grimlock, where he's got the blue visor and the face mask, which doesn't retract, unlike Cyberverse Grimlock, which actually did have a retractable mask and visor. So EarthSpark Grimlock is very G1 in that regards, but his personality is actually much more so like Cyberverse Grimlock instead of G1 Grimlock, where G1 Grimlock is very, oh, me, Grimlock King, and he's all stupid and all that, or Cyberverse Grimlock, where he was like that in Dinobot form at least. EarthSpark Grimlock is actually more so like Cyberverse Grimlock in the fact that EarthSpark Grimlock's very well-spoken and very, like, understanding and all that, but not to the point like Cyberverse Grimlock, where he was very polite and all that, very mild-mannered. EarthSpark Grimlock kind of has a bit of an edge to him, almost reminds me of Corey Payton's performance as RID-15 Grimlock, but a lot smarter than RID-15 Grimlock. So it's a really nice balance EarthSpark Grimlock strikes between Cyberverse and RID-15 Grimlocks, and that's only further strengthened by his voice actor Keith David. So this was confirmed all the way back in March when EarthSpark 1B came out, but because Grimlock never actually spoke in his episodes, we were just having to wait forever for Grimlock to finally speak. So Keith David voices Grimlock very well, and for any of you fans of other stuff, you may recognize him as the voice of Bolo in Final Space, Spawn, the Arbiter in the Halo franchise, and for any Transformers fans, you'll recognize him as having previously voiced Barricade in, of all things, the DS Transformers Bayverse game, for the Decepticon version of it. So Keith David obviously does a really good job of playing Grimlock up as this larger-than-life character where he's very, he does have a bit of edge to him, but he still has maturity that, like, Cyberverse Grimlock had, but without the uptightness that Cyberverse Grimlock had, and I really like that. While Grimlock is talking to Bumblebee and Alita about what happened in Philly with the bot brawl, we cut to Jawbreaker hanging out with Robbie, Mo, and the rest of the Terrans, where he's clearly still feeling disappointed over the fact that he essentially got benched by everyone else when they all got to help restrain Grimlock. And it's at this point where Jawbreaker basically tries to argue with Robbie and Mo that, unlike how everyone else perceives him as this really sweet guy, he claims that he has his own strength that he can use to help out, and that he's not as soft as everyone makes him out to be, which, as we've seen Grimlock, or Jawbreaker throughout the course of this show, that certainly isn't the case. And Mo brings that up in this honestly really interesting way, but also in a indirectly hurtful way, by where Mo jokingly compares Jawbreaker to something called ensaymada, which, after doing some research, is actually a traditional Filipino pastry dish, which is really cool, again, tying into the fact that Robbie and Mo are of Filipino descent, with their father, Alex, being a Filipino man. So I love that the EarthSpark dialogue is doing references to Robbie and Mo and the rest of the Maltos culture as partially Filipino, and which is such a small reference, but it's really cool. So as Jawbreaker is lamenting this fact, he says that he wants to be strong like Grimlock, as he's got a bunch of comic books about Grimlock saying that he's like the strongest Dinobot and Autobots of all, and that he's sure that Grimlock doesn't end up getting benched at all because of how strong he is. So Grimlock overhears this when Alita and Bumblebee keep stressing to Grimlock that he should probably stay at the dugout and recover, considering he's had a rough time in the bot brawl. Grimlock assures Alita and Bumblebee that he's fine, just wants to go out for a walk. So he sees Jawbreaker feeling all down and mopey about himself, and it's at this point where after giving a little pep talk to Jawbreaker, Bumblebee sort of encourages Grimlock to go and act as a mentor to Jawbreaker, which Grimlock gladly accepts as an excuse to sort of get out of the dugout. So he takes Grimlock out for a little training session, while Hashtag actually ends up going with Alita for her own training session, but we'll cut back to Hashtag and Alita later on. We're going to focus on Jawbreaker and Grimlock for now. So Grimlock takes Jawbreaker out to this junkyard that looks very similar to the one actually that Mo and Thrash fought Swindle in all the way back in episode 4 House Rules, but I don't think it's the same junkyard. So Grimlock and Jawbreaker there, where Grimlock is going to basically teach Jawbreaker how to basically unlock his strength that he knows that is inside of him. And I really like how Jawbreaker and Grimlock interact here, where you can see clearly just constantly that Jawbreaker is super excited, asking Grimlock all these questions about how to be a good Dinobot and like how if he's gonna get any of Grimlock's powers like fire breath or super strength and all that. And you can see Grimlock is just trying this so hard to stay calm and just not freak out on Jawbreaker over having his little PTSD episodes throughout the course of this whole episode. But again, it really ties into the fact that Jawbreaker is kind of basically coded as having autism to a degree. And this is something we saw all the way back again in episode 12, Outtakes, where Jawbreaker was talking to Alita and that, and he asked her point blank, what if I'm broken? Because when I look at cars, I don't feel anything. Which is something a lot of like autistic people feel like that when they look at something or interact with something that usually gets a reaction of other people, they don't feel the same way that normal people do, and by normal I mean just people who aren't autistic, I should say. So the fact that that sort of follows this trend here where Jawbreaker is still autism coded, I love that, and it's really empowering to, similar to how Nightshade is a non-binary character meant to basically endorse and promote like non-binary audiences. Jawbreaker to me feels like someone that autistic fans of Transformers can rally behind and get support by. And I think Cyrus Arnold again does a fantastic job as him. For a kid who's only 19 years old as his first ever voice acting role, he does a fantastic job as Jawbreaker. So kudos to you, Cyrus Arnold, for doing such a great job at such a young age too. Anyway, Grimlock has Jawbreaker start out by going to attack basically a bunch of scrap cars in the junkyard, having him pretend them to be Decepticons that are trying to attack him and his family. So I love how Grimlock basically just sort of gently shoves Jawbreaker in front of one of the cars, expecting him to go to town on it, but I just lightly taps it with his fist to the point where one of the mirrors falls off the car, and he just immediately freaks out, like panicking that he broke the car, and tries to put the mirror back on. So Grimlock shows Jawbreaker a little demonstration of how it's done by doing like a little seismic slam stomp, where he stomps the ground to the point where it creates a little shockwave effect that causes a bunch of cars to go flying. And of course, Jawbreaker is totally in awe of this and is eager to go ahead and try to properly get try to like master his strength. And I actually love also how Grimlock basically describes having his own internal strength to Jawbreaker, where Jawbreaker thinks that first asks Grimlock if he's gonna get some sort of big alt mode that will give him super strength. And Grimlock basically sort of corrects Jawbreaker on this by stating that essentially an alt mode doesn't necessarily is the best version of yourself as a Transformer, that who you are is basically more than just your alt mode, that it's not really the best version of you, which to my mind is interesting choice of advice from Grimlock here, considering that's sort of like the opposite of what Tarantula said to Nightshade all the way back in episode 13, where he told them essentially that an alt mode completes you as a Transformer. Grimlock here is basically saying, he's sort of kind of promoting the fact that you don't need an alt mode at all, which I understand maybe actually is very thing to Grimlock too, where he kind of actually hates his alt mode as a T-Rex because it sort of causes him to lose his control over his rage and emotions and basically go into an outburst that causes people to get hurt around him. So maybe Grimlock sort of doesn't like going into his beast mode and tries to avoid it whenever he can, and that's why he's trying to stress to Jawbreaker that he doesn't need an alt mode really to be his best self, and that he can be strong without an alt mode. I really enjoyed that, and while I don't necessarily agree entirely with Grimlock's statement here, I think from where he's coming from as someone who has a trouble with managing his anger when he's in his alt mode as a dinosaur, it's really cool to see him try to pass on that philosophy to Jawbreaker. Long story short though, Jawbreaker has a great time here training with Grimlock. He's smashing cars left and right, and actually, like, when he gets to the last one, he actually does like a little Dinobot roar, which impresses Grimlock, and Jawbreaker is just totally like pumped up now that he's gotten like a real test of his strength. He wants to go ahead and like fight Grimlock just for fun, like a little like play wrestle thing to see how strong he is, but Grimlock tries to reassure him that he shouldn't basically get too excited. And again, as we mentioned before, Grimlock doesn't want Jawbreaker to have his whole anger and just energy, like strength, control him, like have him keep his emotions in check, which is something Grimlock struggles with, because when Jawbreaker says that, like, oh, but you were so cool in the bot brawl, I want to be just like you and be strong so I can beat everyone up, Grimlock, we see flashes, his visor flashes red for a brief moment, and we see like a little flashback of him being stuck in the bot brawl with everyone just cheering him on and like screaming at him in the bot brawl. And these get more and more frequent as the episode goes on, and actually plays into the main conflict of this episode, which is interesting because from the way the conflict of this episode was described in the summary of the episode, it's completely different from that, but I'll get to that later. So we're gonna go ahead now and move on to essentially like what I imagine is the big part of this episode right before the climax is the best way to describe it. Jawbreaker wants to go and show Mo and Hashtag just how strong he's gotten, all the things Grimlock's taught him, so he has Grimlock tag along with him to head to the quarry where we saw Bumblebee, Megatron, and Optimus and RC battle Soundwave back in episode 8, where we see there Mo is watching Alita and Hashtag training together, where Alita's throwing a bunch of rocks at Hashtag, who's basically running around the quarry with her little like wheel roller skates trying to dodge all the rocks. Though she's surprised when she sees Jawbreaker running up on the top of the quarry, telling Hashtag about how much stronger he's got. So to prove this, he tries to go ahead and smash all the rocks that Hashtag is dodging and smashing herself, and so she gets a little bit upset that Jawbreaker's interfering with her training. So when she goes to try and get up to a rock before Jawbreaker can, he ends up actually like tackling Hashtag out of the way, nearly hurting her really badly and breaking the rock in the process. So when Jawbreaker realizes this and realizes that he messed up and hurt Hashtag, he apologizes to her, and she seems to like sort of accept it, but still be kind of hurt by the fact that Jawbreaker was a little too excited, which is honestly really interesting considering how much we've seen Hashtag and Jawbreaker interact throughout the show. Like the last time we saw them interact this closely was, of course, back in Jawbreaker's last big episode, episode 12 Outtakes, where again, Hashtag was sort of on the end where Jawbreaker is now, where Hashtag was sort of just pushing Jawbreaker more and more and annoying him. This time it's Jawbreaker annoying Hashtag more. So I like that sort of ironic twist where Jawbreaker's in the position Hashtag was back in Outtakes, which is really, really cool. But anyway, as Grimlock comes in right after Jawbreaker accidentally hurts Hashtag, Grimlock's there to thankfully calm down Jawbreaker and tell him to keep his emotions in control. But Jawbreaker tries to instead of training with Alita and Hashtag and get in on that, asks Jawbreaker again to try and fight him. He starts like pushing him around and all that, just playfully wanting him to fight him like they did in the bot brawl, but of course not as seriously. But clearly, as we can see, the more and more Grimlock is being pushed by Jawbreaker, it's harder and harder for him to control his own rage when he thinks more about what Mandroid did to him and the PTSD he suffered as a result. And the weird thing is here, which I think is the biggest problem with this episode, we see that Alita clearly notices what's going wrong. And as someone who's clearly been around Jawbreaker Grimlock for a long time, you'd think she'd have the common sense to say, hey Jawbreaker, you might want to cut that out because Grimlock has a really bad problem with his anger, and if you keep making him angry, he's gonna snap and it's gonna be really, really bad. But no, Alita doesn't do that at all. She maybe just gently warns Jawbreaker once, but she doesn't like do anything else. She doesn't try to rip Jawbreaker away from Grimlock, say like, hey, no, cut this out. You're gonna get in a lot of trouble if you make Grimlock really angry. She does none of that. Though even Hashtag and Mo do more to try and stop Jawbreaker than Alita does, which is really, really weird in my opinion, and I'm not exactly a big fan of that. But anyway, it gets to the point where Grimlock eventually gets so angry, not to the point that he transforms, he ends up snapping at Jawbreaker and stomps the ground again, this time creating a shockwave that basically cracks a huge wall in the quarry, revealing none other than a fossil of a Stygi Moloch. And this immediately Jawbreaker is drawn to in a very, very nice callback to Alita and Jawbreaker's conversation back in Outtakes, where she's told him that when he found the alt mode that was right for him, his spark would know it. So almost where it's like his body is on autopilot, Jawbreaker just walks towards the Stygi Moloch fossil like a zombie, just marching towards it with dead eyes until he gets right in front of it and scans it, transforming into his Stygi Moloch alt mode. And I gotta say, I absolutely love Jawbreaker's first transformation here, where it sort of subverts expectations. So we see Jawbreaker just totally looks like he's sort of like just got hazy eyes and just totally like empty head, walking towards the Stygi Moloch fossil, and as he scans it and walks closer and closer to it, we see different parts of his body transform. We see one of his arms transform first, then his legs, then his body, and until finally he transforms into a Stygi Moloch mode and gives like a big roar. And this sort of part I'm like, oh no, he's totally gone feral now and he's gonna go out of control and cause a rampage. But that's where the twist comes in. Jawbreaker is actually in complete control of his alt mode here. And he doesn't struggle with it at all, so he doesn't even realize actually he's transformed at all. It's like he was in a trance this whole time. So after he transforms, Mo and Hashtag are in total awe at Jawbreaker having finally found his alt mode. And so Jawbreaker is confused by this, not realizing he actually transformed until Hashtag and Mo show him that he's transformed into a dinosaur, which Jawbreaker is totally shocked by, but also really happy that he's finally got his alt mode and that he's like his idol, Grimlock. And I really love too how Jawbreaker calls back to his conversation with Alita here, where after he just does a little like inspection of himself running around chasing his own tail, he runs excitedly over to Alita, basically telling to her that it was just like she had told him back in Outtakes, where his spark would tell him when he found the right alt mode, which is really, really cool. And I love how much more deeper Jawbreaker's voice gets when he's transformed as a Stygi Moloch, where he sounds a lot more confident and sure of himself, almost cocky to a degree. And I like that sort of contrast where, as in normal bot mode, Jawbreaker's kind of like Cyberverse Grimlock in the fact that he's very polite, very soft-spoken, but when he actually transforms into Dinobot mode, he doesn't get dumb like Cyberverse Grimlock, but instead he just gets rather cocky and sort of like big-mouthed almost in my regards. And I think that's a really, really cool thing to have the very introverted character sort of like get like an ego boost once he transforms into a Dinobot. I think that's really, really cool. While Jawbreaker is fawning over his new alt mode, Mo explains to him what exactly he's transformed into, where she recognizes it as a dinosaur that she studied back in school called a Stygi Moloch. And she basically gives a whole rundown as to what a Stygi Moloch is, that they're herbivores, they use their large coned heads to headbutt any predators that try to hurt them or the rest of their family. So Jawbreaker immediately loves his alt mode and thinks it perfectly fits him. So he, of course, runs back over to Grimlock and saying that now he's got a Dinobot alt mode, and Grimlock can have a proper fight as Dinobots and just play around and see who's like the strongest that he thinks that he's gonna beat Grimlock. And clearly, Grimlock is still not a fan of Jawbreaker constantly poking him and provoking him into a fight and just making him more and more angry. Again, Alita just gently nudges Jawbreaker to try and get him to stop, but she doesn't really do a lot in this at all. And it just really is really frustrating. So eventually, though, it gets to the point where Grimlock finally actually does snap and ends up transforming into his Dinobot mode again and loses control of his temper. So he ends up going on a rampage, just spewing fire everywhere, and leaves the quarry to head straight to Witwicky and cause chaos there. So at this point, Alita requests Hashtag to help her go into the city to restrain Grimlock, while she has Jawbreaker and Mo stay back because to Mo, she has Mo watch over Jawbreaker, where she believes that perhaps Jawbreaker might end up losing control of himself as well, and she doesn't want Jawbreaker to cause more trouble at the place, which, in my opinion, I'm not exactly sure if that was really the right thing for Alita to do, and it's also kind of hurtful and backpedals sort of on what she had told Jawbreaker all the way back in Outtakes, where she sort of encouraged Jawbreaker to be like, hey, listen, you gotta find out what's best for you. It's not gonna be a car or a plane like your other siblings. It might be something completely different, but when you do find it, you'll have total control over it all. You'll know what's right for you. But now here's Jawbreaker. He's got what he wanted. He knows this is what his spark wanted inside him. But when he finds it, Alita's like, oh no, actually, you could cause more trouble, so we're gonna bench you again. Like, it just feels like a total character regression on Alita's point after she did such a really beautiful speech to him in episode 12, and I'm kind of disappointed by that. While Grimlock's actually losing control of his temper and before he actually transforms into Dinobot mode, I actually gotta say, I love this extended last, nightmare hallucination sequence that Grimlock has of his time being mind controlled by Mandroid, and we get sort of a dramatization of when Grimlock got controlled by Mandroid, where we see Grimlock is like inside the bot brawl arena being restrained by all these arachnamechs, and then we see Mandroid, but he's huge compared to Grimlock, but obviously this is just him imagining this isn't like how it actually happened. And I love just how imposing of a figure Mandroid is. For just being a human, he's still someone that Grimlock clearly fears subconsciously, to the point where we see him pick up Grimlock and like take one of his mind control chips and puts it on him like a spider that slowly crawls up to his chin and latches onto him to take control of him. it's such a cool scene, honestly, and I love that. Now, there is a whole scene of Hashtag and Alita trying to stop Grimlock from wreaking havoc in Witwiki, but it's not really that important right now, so I'm going to go ahead and cut back to that later when Jawbreaker and Mo get involved. What I do want to talk about is this really, really deep and impactful conversation that Jawbreaker and Mo have together. And I don't know what it is with Mo, but whenever Mo has a conversation with another Terran or character, you know it's gonna be one of the most heartfelt and powerful speeches or conversations in the entire show. Literally, we had Mo talk to Thrash in one of the best conversations back in episode 4, House Rules. We had Mo talk to Thrash again in episode 16, Warzone. And now we've got it again here with Jawbreaker in a Stygi situation. And I absolutely love this. So Grimlock is sitting down in the quarry with Mo, who's sitting like next to him on this big rock to try and like be on the same level as him. And Jawbreaker essentially just chastises himself for being stupid, that he should have known better than to talk to Grimlock about Mandroid, and knows and figures out in hindsight that was wrong of him to do, and it would just agitate Grimlock further. And I love how Mo just sort of chastises Jawbreaker here for that, but basically says, hey, don't call yourself stupid, you're not stupid. And that's just something I've really felt myself a lot with. Like, honestly, Hashtag and Thrash are my favorite Terrans, but honestly, I feel like I relate to Jawbreaker the most, where I just felt so insecure about myself so many times throughout my life, especially these past few years, to the point where, like, there have been points where I just felt just like Jawbreaker, like, oh, like, I feel so stupid, like, why did I do this thing? I'm such an idiot. Why does anyone want to be around me? And literally, it's many people around me, like those close to me, I always go say, like, hey, you're not stupid, stop being so hard on yourself, that's not cool. And it's very hard for me to try and move past that, where like Jawbreaker here, he basically says that he's so sick of everyone believing he can only be one thing. He doesn't want to just be like the gentle giant or someone who's just scared of everything. He wants to show people that he can be someone who's tough, someone who can fight for his family. And I love how, again, Mo is just so in tune with all the Terrans' feelings. Like, she knows exactly what to say to everyone here, where she just lets Jawbreaker vent to her before she speaks up, basically saying that she understands what Jawbreaker's going through, and that it can be frustrating when people only see you as one thing. And Mo explains, like I get frustrated when people see me only as a kid or as a girl. And Jawbreaker even mentions this by jokingly referring to her as Ensaimada again, which is basically his way of saying sweet. And I love that too, that how Jawbreaker and Mo really feel like that they have this connection. I love that too, that Mo really bonds with Thrash and Jawbreaker, while Robbie really bonds with Twitch and Hashtag. So it's really nice to see Mo and Jawbreaker have a really sweet moment like this together, where we saw back in Home Parts 1 and 2, Robbie had that moment with Twitch and Hashtag instead when they saw the little racist Transformers Go Home graffiti back in that episode. So again, it's just really, really cool to see this. So it ends basically with Mo and Jawbreaker basically agreeing to a pinky promise of sorts, where they both acknowledge that they're still growing up and they're going to change a lot. So they'll be there to help each other become things and be more well-rounded individuals, but they're never going to lose sight of their true, like, internal values of who they are as people, which Jawbreaker agrees to. And it's such a sweet and empowering message. I absolutely love it. So, and I feel like you guys need to hear some of it for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and try to play as much of this little conversation between Jawbreaker and Mo as I can allow. But hopefully, because Xeon Broadnax and Cyrus Arnold did a fantastic job, and it's easily the best part of this episode in my opinion.
I should have known not to bring up Grimlock's time with Mandroid. How could I be so stupid?
You're not stupid. Don't say that.
I just wanted everyone to know that I can be fierce. That I can be more than one thing and not get put on the sidelines anymore.
I get it. Sometimes people can only see me as one thing. A kid. Or a girl. Can we make a pinky promise? Okay. We're both growing up, so we can help each other change when we need to. But let's make sure we never stop being us.
Deal.
After Jawbreaker and Mo make their pinky promise, they decide they're going to go ahead and head into Witwiki to help Hashtag and Alita deal with Grimlock, and they couldn't have picked better time because it goes to crap real fast, and Grimlock's just destroying everything at Witwiki, and it's kind of surprising how this never gets brought up again throughout the entirety of the last 8 episodes. That Witwiki's just totally fine the next time we see it. We don't see any destroyed cars or craters left from Grimlock's rampage. No one comments on the fact that a giant robot T-Rex was rampaging through the town alongside 2 Autobots or Decepticons. They don't... Well, I'm sure they know who Alita is, but they wouldn't know who Hashtag is. So, the fact that no one seems to mind this, like, whole chaos ensuing in Witwiki, it's a little bit odd in my opinion, and it's the second con I have this episode, really, on top of Alita just not really seeming to do enough to calm down Jawbreaker from agitating Grimlock further. But anyway, when Jawbreaker and Mo get onto the scene and realize that they can help stop Grimlock, I absolutely love how they all try to work together to help him, where they start off at first by Jawbreaker tries to actually outpower Grimlock, where he ends up like headbutting him and working with Hashtag physically to try and restrain him. And Jawbreaker's combat abilities are awesome. I love how he sort of mashes together both his bot mode and his Dinobot mode with his attacks, doing both regular like brawling style attacks, but then also doing like very Stygi Moloch things like doing tail swipes and like headbutts. He even manages to do like a sonic slam that Grimlock showed him to do earlier on this episode. But it unfortunately doesn't do enough to restrain Grimlock, and he's still going on a rampage. So Jawbreaker instead tries for another method as Alita goes to go ahead and try to restrain him, like by shooting him with a stun gun shot from her own ion rifles. But before she can get a shot at him, we see Grimlock just rushing towards Jawbreaker in the middle of this like flaming street, and where Jawbreaker's just constantly trying to reach out to Grimlock, basically trying to throw the same words that Grimlock threw back at him, that he doesn't need an alt mode to be strong, that he can do so much even without his alt mode. And surprisingly, it ends up working. Jawbreaker, just as Grimlock is about to run into him and eat him, Jawbreaker actually transforms back into his bot mode, basically exposes himself and leaves himself vulnerable for Grimlock as a way to try and get him to calm down. And that ends up working. Just as Grimlock is about to go ahead and bite off Jawbreaker's head, he ends up transforming back and getting his temper back under control. And we get this really sweet ending, even although it's a bit abrupt, but really sweet nonetheless, of it's been like raining this whole time, and we see Jawbreaker ends up hugging Grimlock, who is, you see, he tenses up from it at first. And I love this, that even though Grimlock doesn't have a face, you can still tell that he's still uncomfortable with it, but then slowly warms into it as he hugs Jawbreaker back, and then the clouds finally clear and we see Mo, Alita, and Hashtag watching it, and it's really fun and a great end to this episode, even though it's a bit abrupt in my opinion. And so that was my review of Transformers EarthSpark Season 1, Episode 19, A Stygi Situation. If I had to rate this episode, I'd easily give it probably an 8.5 out of 10. It's such a relief to finally see Jawbreaker get his alt mode and interact with Grimlock. It's so cool to see also how Jawbreaker interacts with Grimlock and just gets so excited by him. It sort of also further emphasizes how Jawbreaker is autistic coded. And then his conversation with Mo towards the end of this episode is amazing, and the scene of him in the end finally convincing Grimlock to calm down from his rage and actually transform back was the icing on the cake. The only cons I had with it again were the fact that Alita really didn't feel like she did enough to calm down Grimlock or stop Jawbreaker from agitating Grimlock, and it sort of basically made the conflict happen. That it was the same thing with Nightshade's episode, where it felt like they had to talk in a specific way that felt really forced for Tarantulas to start the conflict. It felt the same way here, that it felt like Alita just had to be very passive for the conflict to happen, where normally this shouldn't have happened. On top of that, the whole fact that just Witwiki just seems to ignore the fact that a bunch of Terrans and Dinobots are running around. I mean, clearly you see people running away from Grimlock, but they don't acknowledge this later on in the show, so that kind of bothers me. But all in all, a very decent start to this final batch of EarthSpark episodes. So that's going to be it for this review. I'll be back next week on Friday with episode 20, Disarmed. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later.